welcome to the latest episode of Sports Talk Law Talk. Byron Brown and Jody Ayler, as always, coming to you. How you doing, Jody?
I'm good, man. One of us looks like it's wintertime. The other one looks like you always do with a tank top. And no, it's the coldest it's going to be all year, and you're just hanging out, man.
Yeah, you know what's funny, though? I have to admit, I had a jacket on. I've been a big fan of wearing a jacket and a toque lately because we don't really get to wear, American toque, beanie or hat.
Okay, yeah.
In Canada, we call that a toque. So I've been living it up because of the cold, especially at night, having the windows open, getting to use a lot of blankets at night finally. I've been having better sleeps. It's nice, man. It's amazing. A nice change in pace.
Like the fact that the air conditioning hasn't been running for, 3 or 4 days is amazing. And I agree, I sleep so much better when it's cold. And now it's, what do you say what's like the coldest you allow it to get in your house? Because ours gets down to 67 and then the heater kicks on.
We're 70.
Okay.
We're 70. But I've just even before we started this, here in my office, I had it set to 73 and it was too hot. Yeah. But I'm going to be honest, man, this might make me sound stupid, but obviously in Canada, we set the heat all the time. This is the first time I even remember ever setting heat since I've left Canada. So I didn't even know what temperature to set it at. I was asking people, I'm like, how do you set your heat? Because normally I don't even know if we've turned on the heat just because we're all Canadianized and we're used to the cold.
I don't remember. Last year, I don't remember really getting very cold. I wake up super early. I'm driving into work at 4:30 a.m. It was 37 degrees the last couple days. And I'm like, this is cold. This is real cold for, an hour. It's that cold. And then it's in the 40s again.
Yeah. And this is the great thing about this time of year. I love to cuddle up in a blanket and watch a good Christmas movie. We had a little talk before, and I think you and I have a little bit of a disagreement that we got to iron out here. Die Hard is not a Christmas movie.
Well, yeah, I agree with that.
Oh, you do? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Die Hard, I feel like if you're going to call a movie a Christmas movie, Christmas has to be the central theme of it, right?
That's what I think. Brian over here, Brian thinks it's a Christmas movie. But I agree. I think for it to be labeled a Christmas movie, I think it has to have some element of Christmas in the movie.
Yeah, you can't just have a bunch of murders taking place, but it happens to be in December and be like, oh, Christmas movie. This captures the Christmas spirit. I don't understand that debate. I think Brian's got to account for the whole half of America that believes that Die Hard is. Now, can I be 100% honest with you?
Yeah.
I've never seen Die Hard.
Are you serious?
I've never seen it.
Wow, that's hard to believe, man. I don't know if I know anybody who hasn't seen Die Hard.
I've never seen a Sylvester Stallone movie, any movie of Sylvester Stallone, and I've seen Die Hard with a Vengeance. I think I saw as a freshman in the movie theater, but I've never seen that. I just know it's Die Hard. It's not a Christmas movie. It can't be.
Well, for Jody, you just said something that's ridiculously crazy. Die Hard's not a Sylvester Stallone movie.
No, I know. I'm just saying
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I was like.
In my brain, that made sense. I should clarify, action movies. I'm just not into action movies. So I've never seen that whole genre of early 90s movies that are Stallone and Bruce Willis and are Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. I've seen Twins and Kindergarten Cop. I've never seen any other Schwarzenegger movie.
What are your top 3 Christmas movies?
Number 1 is definitely Home Alone. That's our Ayler family tradition. We watch that, my wife and I, when we're wrapping presents the night before. 2 would be Christmas Story. And then 3 is It's a Wonderful Life. I think those are the no doubters. What's on your list?
Elf is number 1. My wife and I watch Elf every year. It's hands down my favorite. How the Grinch Stole Christmas with Jim Carrey is my number 2. And number 3 is Krampus.
I've never seen it.
So Krampus, and Adam Scott is in Krampus, and then there's another guy who's funny in it, and I just can't remember his name. But essentially the way the story goes is Krampus is essentially the opposite of Santa.
Yeah.
So on Christmas Eve, Krampus comes around and he'll steal your children and steal your presents if you're a naughty kid. And it's actually like it's kind of like a lot of horror movies. You know, it's a little bit cheesy, but it's an easy watch. It's not something you're going to leave thinking like it's going to win an Emmy or anything, but like it's going to entertain you. Because I posted that on social media, I got a lot of blowback about Krampus, and I was like, listen, man, you got to add new things to the list. You know, like I know Family Vacation, National Lampoons with Chevy Chase. Obviously, it's up there. Like that's one of the classics. But those classics become classics because they happen at Christmas. Like I had someone yesterday tell me Edward Scissorhands was a Christmas movie.
Cut him out of your life. Like, don't ever talk to that person again.
Cut him out. Yeah, what an apropos thing with Edward Scissorhands. But yeah, man, it's crazy. The other thing that's crazy, a little bit of a sideshow happened over the weekend. Jake Paul fought Nate Robinson. Tyson also fought Roy Jones Jr. We talked a little bit about it on the radio this morning. Did you watch it? First of all, did you spend the $49.99 to watch it?
No, I did not spend the $49.99, but I did watch it because you can go on to Periscope, the app that lets people stream video. And what happens this is how I've watched every pay-per-view, but McGregor Mayweather, I actually had some buddies over to watch, is on Periscope, people just put their phone at their TV and you can watch their feed of it. And so it was, Saturday night, and I'm like, oh shit, there's a fight on. And so my wife and I were supposed to be watching The Queen's Gambit on Netflix, but I'm like, I got to watch these two 50-year-olds pretend to fight. So that's what I did.
Yeah, these two geriatrics fight it out.
So listen, you spent the money though, right? Like you paid money for it.
Yeah, you know what is weird is like my wife, she's relatively into that sort of thing. It's not like she's adverse to it. But I wasn't going to do it. And then she's like, you know what? I'm actually kind of interested in it. And so we watched it. And first of all, the Jake Paul, Nate Robinson fight, which I think almost everybody is talking about more so than the Tyson fight. Listen, think about what you want about Jake Paul. The one thing I've always said about those guys is like their goal is to make money. And the way they're making it hand over fist is, you know, people love to watch a car wreck, and these guys are car wrecks. And he slept Nate Robinson. He made it look relatively easy. So, I mean, all personal opinions aside about the guy, you know, it's hard to doubt these guys when they go out and they say the things that they do, and then people are going to make money off of them. And I think they're kind of like the cockroaches of society. And I don't say that in a negative way. I just mean like they're always going to be around, you know, and like we love to hate them, but they make, you know, I don't know. What's your 2 cents about Jake Paul or the Paul brothers in general?
Well, first of all, I love that. Like, I agree with you. They're the cockroaches of society. Like, we can definitely say that's an insult because fuck those guys. Like, they trade in attention only. They don't care how they get it. They don't care at what cost. They don't care who it may offend. Like, they're just, we want attention. Let's seek it out. Now, I'll give them credit to this. Stepping into a boxing ring in front of other people and fighting and potentially getting knocked out takes some balls, right? Like, there's a lot of people that just don't have the balls to get in and fight. So I tip my cap for having the balls to do that. But I just want to see him get knocked the fuck out. Like, that's really the appeal. I think Jake Paul and the Paul brothers, you and I are too old to understand their appeal, right? They're the villains in the 80s movie that we grew up watching, but in real life. And I'm like, I would have never watched fucking Cobra Kai in real life beat the shit out of, you know, Daniel. Like, that would have had no appeal to me when I was 12 years old. But the Paul brothers, they're these villains from 80s movies that somehow have monetized it, and they're very successful. And I don't get it at all. I would only watch that fight. Like, if he fought, he's calling out McGregor, right? And he's just trying to get as much attention, credit to him. But like, somebody get in the ring and shut his mouth. He's not that good of a fighter. He's just, I mean, he's not, he's a boxer, but you tell me, I mean, what is he?
So, yeah, you know what? I mean, I guess you kind of have to say he's a boxer because he's had 2 professional fights now. But, you know, when you talk about tough guys knocking people out, you know, I'm a hockey guy, but people are sleeping on hockey players. I'm telling you, like, I know that Evander Kane, which I'm not a big fan of, but, he's come out and he called out the Paul brothers. And then Logan Paul was on his podcast talking about Evander Kane, saying he didn't know who he was. He didn't even know that hockey players drop their gloves and have fist fights on a sheet of ice. I mean, that's a thing. Now, you go and look at someone like Ryan Reeves.
Yep.
If you guys don't know who Ryan Reeves is, Google him. Google Dustin Byfuglien. These men are as big as linebackers, and they're skating on ice, and they're allowed to fight each other, and they punch each other in the face from junior all the way up to the professional level. It's hard for me to believe that a hockey player couldn't get in the ring and knock out Jake Paul relatively easily. I would say that above anyone else. You take the toughest guy like Ryan Reeves from the NHL, I'm pretty sure he could probably put anybody to sleep in the NFL, the NBA. And I'm being dead serious when I say that. I know that people can disagree with me, but like in no other sport is there a position that your sole job is to punch someone in the face.
Right.
That exists within hockey.
Right.
And these guys have been doing it since they were 16, 17, and 18. So, one of the big aversions of training mixed martial arts or fighting for some people is they can't get punched in the face. As soon as they get punched in the face, it's their fight or flight response. These hockey players have been doing that. I mean, listen, I'm not taking anything away from Jake Paul, but I'd really love him to get in the ring with someone who's actually been in fights. So because you want to put him against a level playing field as far as skill goes. So listen, I think if he fights Conor McGregor, if he fights anybody in the UFC, he loses.
Yeah.
I mean, I've sparred.
I was going to ask,
professional.
Have you sparred before? So what is, in boxing, most people can't relate to it, but it's how much of it is technique and how much of it is strength and power? I
would say it's probably 90% technique. You need to throw your punches properly, but like I've been in the ring with guys that are professional, and like they'll make you feel silly fast. Like all of a sudden you're hit with something and you don't even know what's happening, or you're taking a liver shot, and if anyone's taking a liver shot, like your body shuts down. It's that painful. You just like you cripple and you don't know what to go. So I don't know if he's really been in the fire with that, right? Like if you watch his first fight, he knocked a guy out. The second fight, Nate Robinson didn't do anything. He charged in with a jab and hugged him. And, Jake Paul, to his credit, he adjusted, he stepped back, and he hit him with a hook, and he put him to sleep. So I don't know. I think that they're a little bit smart because they're generating their own business. But I want to see him fight somebody who's not like Nate Robinson. Probably didn't take it as seriously as he should have. He maybe had too big of an ego to get punched in the face in sparring or get down and dirty. And the thing is these guys have nothing to do but train. Like they're millionaires just through YouTube. So like they got a lot of time to train. If you don't think that these guys are smart enough to think, hey, I'm going to call these guys out, they're going to put in the work to try to keep their name alive. Because guess what? If they lose, they start losing a little bit of their credibility, and that'll start hitting them in the pocketbook. And maybe that's what they need, someone to just put them to sleep.
Well, so you have also, correct me if I'm wrong, you've also fought hockey fights. So you've been on the ice and you have participated in the gloves coming off and exchanging punches with someone while on ice skates on frozen water. That's something you've done.
Yep.
And so
yeah, I did a lot.
I feel like when you say it's like 90% technique, I think, well, maybe that's actually an advantage for Jake Paul, because if Ryan Reeves got into the boxing ring with Jake Paul, does he know how to box or does he know how to hockey fight? And what's the difference? Because I think Nate Robinson's like 5'8". He's small, but he's a world-class athlete. He played football at Washington, track and field, NBA dunk contest. He's a world-class athlete, but he's not a boxer. NBA fights are the least technically sound fights you'll ever see. So would a hockey player know enough about boxing to beat Jake Paul?
I believe so. And the reason why I believe so is they know how to take a punch and they know how to throw a punch, which is probably more than Nate Robinson could say.
Yeah.
So even if they don't have any boxing experience, actually in a ring with boxing gloves on, which I find hard to believe. Most hockey guys usually cross-train with boxing anyways, just because it's fun to do, as opposed to just running up hills. So I think on average, if you just took Ryan Reeves right now and put him in a boxing ring with Jake Paul, I think Ryan Reeves demolishes Jake Paul. Like, he doesn't have to train anything, in my opinion. He'd go in there, now it would be a brawl. The old adage in boxing is, you brawl a boxer and box a brawler. And I think that's what Jake Paul did, is he just went in there and brawled. Okay, so I think Ryan Reeves could go in there and brawl with him. I really do believe it. Now, are we going to see it? I don't think we're going to see it. The only fight Jake Paul's going to take is against someone that's going to be guaranteed to help him with pay-per-view buys. And I think, because if you see with the pay, Jake Paul got paid $600 for that fight.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, if you look at the public disclosure, he was paid $600. Now, because he knows he's making way more money. He dropped a music video the same night he won the fight. He dropped a clothing line the same night he won a fight. Like, that guy made millions.
Yeah.
I wonder if he ended up monetizing more than Tyson or Roy Jones Jr. So that's the strategy, and that's why he's calling out Dylan Dennis and McGregor and stuff, because those are the guys he needs to fight. Quite honestly, it would, in some regards, be a step down for him with his celebrity to fight someone like Evander Kane, because the general public doesn't know Evander Kane. The general public really probably isn't even hockey fans. Like, I love hockey, but generally within the United States at least, the sport is going to be NFL, NBA, NHL is going to be a distant fourth or fifth on the list. So that's not really an appealing. If you're a manager of Jake Paul, you want him to fight someone in the UFC or another professional boxer like Ryan Garcia, who he's called out, because that's going to make you the most amount of money.
Yeah, so like he's in this tough spot because Conor McGregor's too fucking big. Like, there's no reason for McGregor to lower himself into fighting Jake Paul. But I heard someone float this idea, and I thought it was interesting. Like, why couldn't there be a celebrity boxing league? So there could be like a celebrity boxing champion, and let's say that Jake Paul is declared the celebrity boxing champ. I would watch him, like, let's say it is Ryan Reeves or other athletes or other, actors and musicians that think, yeah, I can do what he did. I would be more into that than watching him pretend to be a legitimate professional fighter fighting other professional fighters, because to me, that's where my intelligence gets insulted. And it's like, you might be able to fight and be a boxer, but you're not a world-class fighter, right? Those are typically like 12 on, they're training for the Olympics, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well, you might get what you want, because I don't know if you saw the announcement. Triller has partnered with Snoop Dogg to create Fight Club. And I'm assuming what Fight Club is, and I haven't read the article thoroughly, is obviously legends like Tyson and Jones would probably be within Fight Club. But I'm assuming Fight Club is going to be more of these, I'll call them the sideshow fights.
Yeah.
Like Jake Paul and an NHL guy, or Jake Paul and an NBA guy, or whatever it is. I think we're going to see more of them. And the one thing for sure, without a shadow of a doubt, that you can say after the Jake Paul fight is, like, you got a lot of celebrities thinking about going, oh shit, maybe I should fight Jake Paul because I can make a couple mil. That's why these guys, like you saw Robin Lanier of the Golden Knights pop off and say something. You saw Ryan Reeves say that Bissonnette should fight Jake Paul. And I mean, shit, if you're Bissonnette, I mean, he's doing well for himself regardless. But but if you're Jake Paul, why would you want to fight Bissonnette? He probably doesn't even know who Bissonnette is. And that's no insult to Bissonnette. It's just like, again, I think they're going to go with the money, and the money's going to flow, I think, more with like higher profile celebrities than professional hockey players. And I say that with a hurt in my heart because I love hockey, but that's just calling a spade a spade.
Well, more importantly, it got you thinking about fighting other lawyers. That was really the takeaway.
Yeah, it's funny. So I've been asked a bunch of times if I would fight, and I've always said, yeah, like whoever wants to fight another lawyer, I'd totally be down for it. All I've ever said is, let's promote it, let's sell tickets, and then let's donate the money to charity.
Yeah.
I'm not in it just to do it, but if there's some positive that we can generate from it and people want to do it, and it'd be really fun to punch some arrogant lawyer in the mouth, like I would get a lot of enjoyment out of that, because I got to deal with them on the day-to-day, and a lot of them I think could use probably a punch in the face. But, hey, the other fight, obviously the main fight, was Tyson Jones. What did you think about the Tyson and Jones fight?
I thought, to me, Mike Tyson still has a presence. That was like the biggest takeaway, is that Mike, 100%. There are very few human beings that make you kind of sit upright when you see them doing what they do. And even if it's been years since he's fought and he's 54, and, you and I talked about this on the radio, he looked older outside of the ring than he did inside the ring. I thought you put that well, where his his face entering the ring, I was like, holy shit, he's old, man. Like it's starting to look, and he's not like a normal 54. It's a hard 54. So I thought it was entertaining. Obviously, Roy Jones Jr. was not interested in necessarily fighting Tyson. He was interested in hanging on and not getting embarrassed. But it kept my attention. I'm glad it was 8 rounds. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm glad it wasn't any long. I'm glad it could have been probably a few rounds shorter, but it was entertaining for what it was. What did you think?
Yeah, no, I think it was entertaining. I went into it thinking, well, actually knowing, obviously it was two 50-year-old fighters that were way past their prime. And like, obviously I'm not expecting the Tyson from the 90s. But it was just really cool as a boxing fan to see two of the biggest legends, at least in my era, fight. Roy Jones and Tyson. Everyone wondered how it was going to go. Obviously, we still are never going to know how it goes as far as what they're in the prime. But it was entertaining. I would have liked to see Jones maybe not wrap up Tyson as much. But at the same time, Tyson was throwing some of those punches with really bad intentions. And you can't blame Roy for going like, shit, I really don't want to get hit with one of those because it could really do damage. And especially when you're 50, I'm 42, I'm not recovering like I did in my 30s. And I know in my 50s, I'm not going to recover, like I did in my 40s. And so I don't blame those guys, so some people have been really critical about Jones's performance hey, listen, man, I think they did as good as they could have done. I didn't really expect anything more. We got to see, Tyson still doing his old peekaboo and coming up with the big hooks. So that was all cool to me, like it brought me back to the 90s, when you were in a bar watching the pay-per-view and that was the biggest event was a Tyson boxing match. That's what got everybody together back in the day, right? There was no UFC back then. There was no other pay-per-views. Like if Mike Tyson fought, everyone was going to watch Mike Tyson. So to me, that was super cool.
It reminded me of like, I'm a big Bruce Springsteen fan, and like I've seen Bruce Springsteen in concert, and you're seeing 60-year-old Bruce Springsteen on the stage, but he's still bringing it better than 90% of whatever other live acts you're going to do. And I kind of felt the same way about Tyson. It's like, this is clearly nowhere near his prime Mike Tyson, but maybe this is a commentary on the state of boxing. I would still rather watch 54-year-old Mike Tyson than about 90 to 95% of any other boxer. Like Fury, Wilder, it's fine, but it's, you're kind of having to convince yourself that both of these guys are going to matter beyond that fight. You know what I mean? Like there's a legacy and a legend with Mike Tyson that is, I think, only comparable to like the Mick Jaggers, Bruce Springsteens, who are still putting on like Bono. They're nowhere near their prime, but there's still something incredible. Like, yeah, I went and saw U2 live, and I don't care if it's 2019 or whatever, whenever the last time we could watch a live concert, there's still something memorable about it. And I think Tyson has that quality.
Yeah, I mean, those are people you mentioned, Tyson, Mick Jagger, like they've transcended their profession, like even if you're not a boxing fan, you know who Mike Tyson is, even if you're not a fan of, music in general, Bruce Springsteen, who Mick Jagger is, you might not have watched him in concert, listen to your music, but you know who they are. And Tyson, it was interesting. Tyson came out and said that he smoked a joint before going in the ring. And some people, I guess, are taking issue with it. It's always kind of baffled me. I don't know if you remember this. I'm going to take everybody back to Lillehammer, Winter Olympics. I forget the year. There was a Canadian snowboarder who won gold. And then he tested positive for the old devil's lettuce. And they tried stripping him of it. And he successfully defended himself by saying, which is probably not true, he was in a gondola and some other people hotboxed him in there. Such a Canadian response, right?
And
like,
hey,
it wasn't
thing.
me. Yeah, like I was just snowboarding. I was in it and they hotboxed it. Like, but he got away with it. I don't have any issue with Tyson, with Tyson smoking a little joint before.
It's legal in like 30 states now. Like, I agree. Like, if somebody like pinned him down to the ground and forced him to smoke marijuana, like it's some sort of conspiracy to throw the match. Okay, different story, but like, who gives a shit? Like, I can't imagine caring at this point who smokes weed and who doesn't. If it's legal, where was that fight? I don't even know physically.
It was in Nevada. It was in Nevada.
So shit. I mean, I'm assuming you know better than that. I'm assuming some form of marijuana is legalized in the state of Nevada. Am I right?
So recreational marijuana is legal.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But the problem still is that the athletic commissions, right?
Yeah.
Like it's still illegal to within the athletic commission. So I don't know if that's going to affect his ability to get a license next time in any particular state because they don't allow marijuana metabolites in people's systems.
So here's my quick question for you on this. It was great watching it one time. Tyson came out afterwards and said he wants to fight 3 or 4 more times. Would you watch more Mike Tyson? Like, I think part of the reason I enjoyed it is because we didn't see a 50-year-old man get knocked out. I actually think seeing one of them get knocked out would be kind of alarming. You know, you'd almost be like, oh shit, they might have just really fucked themselves up. Would you watch more Mike Tyson?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because I do remember him coming out in the interview and indicating that he was going to do more of it, and he was kind of poking Roy Jones into more of it, and maybe even having them a second fight. I definitely would not be as excited for a second fight between Tyson and Jones because we've already seen it, and I don't believe the second fight is going to be any different than the first, so like why redo it? It wasn't like there was any controversy, at least. You know, I know you can debate if it was a draw or not, but I mean, overall, I think everyone was generally just like, it is what it is. I guess, you know, but shit, if Tyson steps in the ring with Lennox Lewis or Evander Holyfield, that probably would get my attention. But Tyson fighting anyone other than, you know, a Lewis or a Holyfield, and, you know, Evander Holyfield, he just made an appearance on Alex A-Rod's show, A-Rod's new show about where he goes in and he helps athletes that have fallen on hard times. And, you know, if Holyfield's really on hard times, it might really be interesting for him to step in the ring against Tyson.
But don't you think that's where this fight was enjoyable because it didn't feel sad? There's a certain part of the aging boxer where you see Larry Holmes, Evander Holyfield, even when he was fighting years ago, where you're kind of like George Foreman. It's kind of depressing because you're like, listen, man, you've taken enough hits to the head. It's time to just sit this one out. Additional hits to the head. You're just fucking. At this point, the glory and fame isn't what's driving you. It's just a desperation, and that's where I think old guys boxing can get real sad real quick if they don't do it the right way.
Yeah, no, you bring up a really good point. Listen, if Roy Jones would have been knocked out, I don't think I would have been excited.
No.
Just like if Tyson was knocked out, I wouldn't have been excited. I think it would have gone from like me enjoying it to me being like, man, I feel bad. Like, you know, who wants to watch a guy that old get slept? I mean, it's just, it's not a good thing. And like, you think about his family, then you think about how it's going to impact him. Obviously, we have those same concerns with younger people, but I think there are more valid concerns with older people. Yeah, that would have turned me right off. Like, and that's, I think, something they got to face. You know what's interesting is, and I don't know how many people noticed it, but at the interview after, and the guy was interviewing Tyson and Jones. Part of that interview, Tyson apologized to Jones. I don't know what he apologized for, but I tend to think that they probably had a gentleman's agreement on how hard they were going to punch each other. And because Tyson says, oh, sorry about that. And Jones is like, no, you did what you got to do, sort of thing. So I believe that was what that was in reference to. So if these guys do have some sort of an agreement that the general public doesn't really know about, it would make sense to me. It doesn't make me upset at all because actually I would hope that they'd have that sort of agreement so nobody is knocked out, because anybody who says you want to see Tyson or Jones knocked out, I think is full of shit, or they just shouldn't be watching it because no one wants to see that. You know what? If they have that sort of agreement, I would welcome it. I want to see them get in the ring and kind of do a little bit of a dance, and an exhibition, I guess, is the best way to describe it. But yeah, to your point, I don't want to see anybody get knocked out or, you know, have anything really negatively impact them. And I think if you heard the announcement, right, like Sugar Ray Leonard was saying the same thing, even Snoop Dogg, no one wanted to see it. You want to see them get in there and kind of do a little bit of business, but we don't want the business to go south.
So would you rather see Tyson fight someone else, or would you rather see Jake Paul fight Ryan Reeves?
Oh man, Paul and Reeves.
Yeah,
Paul and Reeves, because fight. You know what? It's a real fight, and like Ryan Reeves, I don't know how big he is. Hey, can you Google Ryan Reeves? Tell me. I mean, I bet the guy's 6'2", 6'3", 230, 240. You know, Jake Paul had a height and reach advantage on Nate Robinson, which typically you don't want to have, right? If you can avoid it, because happens what happened. Nate Robinson can get slapped. And I think that's what happened. So I think I want to see Jake Paul. I would like to see Jake Paul fight someone who has experience fighting, whether it's on the street, in the hockey rink, or in a ring. I think that would be interesting, and I think people would pay for it, because I think people want to see Jake Paul get knocked out. And to his credit, he even said it in his interview. He said, look, at like everybody hates me, and it's a hard thing to deal with, but I think he's fully embraced that role. He's 6'2". How much does he weigh?
225.
So 6'2", 225, and he's muscle, right?
Yeah.
Like you're talking about a guy who's in shape. I would love to see that, man.
Me
Or
too.
Dustin Bufflin. Have you seen some of the videos of Dustin Bufflin?
No.
I don't know what he's doing. I think he's going through some issues, but with his on hockey, I mean, he would manhandle grown men, like just pull them out of scrums and stuff. There's a video of him pulling out 2 at once, and it's just comical how strong these guys are. But we go from a plenty of opponents for Jake Paul to fight to no quarterbacks to start for the Denver Broncos. This was a very unique situation, one which, you know, I think everybody thought could happen, but it actually happened. So what exactly went down with the Steelers and the Broncos there, Jody?
So the Broncos quarterback group, there's 4 quarterbacks on an NFL roster. They decided to come in during an off day and watch film together. They didn't follow protocols. They didn't wear masks. Turns out one of them had COVID, which means contact tracing meant all 4 of the quarterbacks were ineligible to play this past Sunday. So the Broncos were unable to get that game moved. And we're going to talk about the Ravens and Steelers game in a moment. The NFL moved that game 3 different times, 6 days from its original airing. The Broncos weren't afforded any flexibility. And so they were forced to play a game. They had a practice squad wide receiver who had never played in the NFL, who was not even in the quarterback room, who played quarterback part-time in college, was then forced to play quarterback in the Broncos game. Now, the Broncos actually wanted to take one of their coaches and say, hey, this coach used to be a quarterback. Can he play? And the NFL's like, no, you can't let coaches play in the game. And so they went with this guy. He completed 1 pass for 13 yards, which crazily enough isn't even close to being the worst performance by a quarterback in NFL history. Ryan Leaf, 1998, Ryan Leaf, the former NFL bust, completed 1 pass out of 15 for 4 yards. So he wasn't the worst, but it was bad. It was ugly. And then adding insult to injury, Brian, after the game, Drew Lock, who was the starting quarterback of the Broncos, who wasn't able to play, his mom released some social media posts defending her son, saying, he takes this seriously. He's a good kid. Everybody back off my son. And I was like, oh, that's not going to help at all. No. After age 10 or 11, mom stepping in and defending never goes well.
Especially when you're a professional athlete and a grown man. And look, just let other people defend you. But yeah, mom, you did your son no favors there. I ended up not being able to watch the game. So did everything else, he just handed off, and they just ran.
It was hideous. It was, it's like, have you ever been on I-10 and there are these billboards that say the thing? Like it's a sideshow attraction, like the thing, next exit. And there's you kind of think in your head it's cool, and then it's the dumbest thing you've ever seen. This game, there was a spectacle to it of whoa, what's it going to look like? I mean, what happens if he wins? Is it the greatest story ever? But it was awful. I mean, just bad football.
Give me your opinion. Okay, you got Roger Goodell, who's at the helm of this ship, so to speak, the ship being the NFL, and you have COVID essentially, I don't know if ravaging the NFL, I feel like that's too excessive, but it's damaging it for sure. It's moving games. You got Roger Goodell coming out saying that for the playoffs, there's going to be no bubble. Do you think that that's a smart move on his part?
If I look at it from a business perspective, yes, because I think it's the only way you can do it. Because the NFL, and I'm going to knock on wood a whole bunch here. Everybody's safety and health and well-being is the priority of if they get sick, but the NFL has not had any consequences for their course of action. It's not like the people getting sick on NFL teams are the same people ending up intubated in the ICU. And so, by and large, 99% of all NFL athletes that have contracted COVID have recovered and returned to play. Now, there's two exceptions. One was a rookie in Jacksonville who ended in the hospital twice, and his season's over, but nobody seems to really care about that. And then there was another, I believe, a New York Jet reserve lineman who had the heart condition myocarditis, whose season is also done. But that's 2 out of literally hundreds. And so if I'm the NFL, satisfying the TV partners, keeping the revenue faucet turned on as much as it can go right now is kind of a defensible strategy, because there hasn't been a human cost that would otherwise deter them from doing that. So I think from a human standpoint, I'm like, well, why don't we just take a couple weeks and figure out a different way to do this, because the disruptions are crazy, it's inequitable, and it's affecting the competitive integrity. But I think the NFL only cares that they get to the playoffs,
Right. And no, I get that. But from a business standpoint, from my perspective, it's like, what do you have to lose from going in the bubble? You can still make your TV deals and everything, right? And like, I just feel like it gives you more of a guarantee, or I shouldn't say guarantee, more of a chance of success of ensuring that none of the games get moved. Because like, imagine if that Broncos situation with the quarterback, imagine that happens with the NFC Finals game.
Yeah.
I mean, who's going to watch it?
I know.
Like, and like your TV partner's probably not going to be excited about airing that game, because who wants to watch that fucking game, especially after the Broncos and Pittsburgh played. And I didn't hear one person say they enjoyed the game. Even if you were a big Pittsburgh fan and you saw them win, it wasn't a competitive game. And no one wants to watch football that's not competitive, at least in my opinion.
So the NFL, what they're basically saying is, and I think this is probably what's going to happen, teams are going to kind of go into their own bubbles. They're going to kind of, it's sort of like what we're doing in the country, where each state is making up its own protocols instead of the federal government saying, everybody do this one thing. The NFL's probably leaning on teams and coaches and GMs and owners to say, hey, everybody, we're going into this hotel. You're not leaving. It's not a bubble, but we want to win a championship. And the only way we're going to win a championship is if everybody minds their business. And so there's going to be a bubble-like effect. The only downside, Byron, is that the NBA spent $200 million executing their bubble, because it's not just testing, it's security, it's food, it's staff members. You're talking about 53-man rosters for 14 teams, thousands of players. You've got to 3 meals a day. You've got to have entertainment. You've got to have entire hotels and resorts blocked off. And so I think the NFL's like, well, if we don't need to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to make this happen, we don't have to.
Yeah, but that's a tricky game. I get it. I didn't know that the numbers were that much for the NBA, but it makes sense. But then the flip of it is if you can't play.
Yeah.
Or if it gets pushed out. I mean, what happened with the Ravens and Steelers game? What was it, postponed 3 times in 6 days?
Yep.
What happened with that game, Jody?
So that was originally scheduled to be Thanksgiving night. The Baltimore Ravens had a COVID outbreak, and 18 players, and it was every day there were new positives. So they pushed it back. From Thanksgiving night, they finally settled on Wednesday afternoon. That game kicked off at 1:40 p.m. local time on a Wednesday afternoon, and it was a terrible game. Now, this game was important because the Steelers are 10-0, the Ravens were 6-4. They're bitter rivals, and so there's actual playoff stakes, and it was a terrible game. one of the Steelers players tore his ACL in the game. All the players that played in the game came in afterwards were like, this was dumb. I can't believe we played this. We weren't ready. They weren't able to practice until Tuesday. And so it was a mess. I mean, and to your point, you can't do that in the postseason. You can't move a game to kick off in the middle of the week. And so this was basically the second NFL team to experience a full-fledged outbreak, which was started because a strength and conditioning coach didn't wear his mask or his contact tracing bracelet. So they had no way to know who was exposed and when. And it eventually ripped through most of the team, including the quarterback, the tight end, who's a type 1 diabetic, contracted COVID-19, and there was concern as a comorbidity for a lot. I mean, diabetes is considered a pretty serious precondition to deal with COVID, but so far so good, thankfully.
See, even in a situation like that with a guy with diabetes, like, it's hard to believe everybody around him wouldn't comply. But that's kind of where we're at with it right now, right? People aren't complying. Whether it's like legal liability that people face, I don't know what has to change. But my whole opinion about this has always been is like, man, we just really need to come together as a society and do something, because this has persisted. And the old definition, right, of insanity is keep doing the same thing thinking you're going to get a different result. Like, we need to change things up a little bit, or we end up like the 49ers, right? Now the 49ers are playing I think weeks 13 and 14 here in Arizona because of the restrictions over there. I think it's in Santa Clara County, if I remember correctly. And so that's going to be interesting. The 49ers have come out, to the credit of State Farm Field and also the Arizona Cardinals. They have been very welcoming to the 49ers, which I think is great under the conditions. But like, imagine if something like that happened, a state, right? Because I think the Super Bowl's in Florida, right?
Tampa Bay, yeah.
Tampa Bay. Well, there we go. At least we know that the Super Bowl is safe, because Florida's going to let anything happen out there. But imagine we see more of these teams playing in different states just to avoid the restrictions of their current state. And I mean, that again takes me back to good old, and again, I get the cost, but I want to, like most NFL fans, see everything as smooth as possible. And we don't want to see a game played out in circumstances that aren't fair, because then you're always going to wonder who would have won that particular game. Say if the starting quarterback could start or something like that. I'm sure there's quarterbacks and players that have played in the playoffs and in games with the flu. Obviously this is different, but it's interesting to see how all of this is going to play out. I don't have a good feeling about it, meaning like I feel like some really jacked up shit is probably going to happen during the playoffs, which is going to cause a lot of things to change, I think. I hope I'm wrong, but I feel like that's what's going to happen.
So, yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, I hope it doesn't come to that. And what's interesting about that 49ers is that Santa Clara County shut down. They have a lower infection rate right now than Maricopa County does. So the 49ers are leaving a place because the local government shut down that's actually safer. I mean, by every objective measurement, there's less infection where the 49ers leaving, but they're coming here to play. And then there's a part of me, Byron, that's like, well, good for that hotel and the businesses around Glendale who haven't had 70,000 people there 10 times a year that now get, another 70 professionals coming to spend money and do takeout. Like, you kind of feel good, but then you're like, also, what are we doing here? Now, This probably isn't a conversation for this podcast, but just to plant a seed, because I think it's a fascinating conversation for us to have later.
Yeah.
There are questions about whether leagues or teams are going to be able to mandate that their players take the vaccine. So if we get to January and first responders and medical personnel and assisted living facilities and the elderly have received the first crack at vaccines, if we get to January, is there a case to be made that like, hey, then the NFL can swoop in and just vaccinate every player? Or is that like it's going to go in America? I'm sure there's plenty of anti-vaxxers in a football uniform that are like, I don't want to take that shit. So that's a meatier topic, but it's pretty interesting to think about.
Yeah, you're right. That's a very meaty topic. I'll say this about that, though. I would find it very hard to believe that the NFL or any teams within the NFL, they cannot legally make any players take a vaccine. However, if they negotiated with the union and the union and the league and the teams came to an agreement on how this vaccine was going to be administered, then obviously if there's an agreement about it, then it would be in place and every player would get it done. But we're going to go into another debate, right, which was the Trump-Biden debate. And now the new debate, I believe, is going to be, we got a lot of people who don't want to take the vaccine, and we got people who want to take the vaccine. And on top of it, we have COVID. And that is going to be a really meaty topic, I think, for us to deal with here in the future. Because there's going to be, I already know a lot of people who either say they're never going to take the vaccine no matter what. I have people who say, I don't want to take the vaccine at the early stages, but after other people take it and I see that there's no negative side effects, I'll take it. And then you have people who say, yeah, I'll take it the first time it comes around. But employers do not have the legal ability to make anybody get a vaccine. But it's going to be one of those social situations. Again, I feel like probably like masks, right? Is people are going to talk about it, and I think that's where the pressure is going to come from. We don't want to leave on such a sour note, but there's a very positive story. Tell us about the Colts kicker.
Yeah, so Rodrigo Blankenship, he's a quirky kicker from Georgia. He wears goggles. He's kind of nerdy. He's kind of like whatever you would typically associate with kickers. Had kind of a heartwarming story. And by the way, this is a team that their punter was just diagnosed with cancer. And so this was kind of the right team at the right time. But Rodrigo Blankenship, and when he found out he was going to be the kicker, I mean, the Lego story is hilarious. I mean, what was your opinion of it?
Yeah, they asked him what he was doing when he found out that he got named the starting kicker for the Colts. And he was building a Ferrari Lego, and he said that he was also talking to his girlfriend. But he goes, yeah, I was doing like a Lego Ferrari, nothing crazy. So, he's probably into like, I think the most expensive in many pieces is there's a Death Star Lego set that's the most, but I think they just came out with another one that's more pieces than the Death Star. But that's him. And I mean, I love it. I love it that this guy is willing to be an NFL player and come out and say what he said. I think it speaks volumes for him. I think obviously, you told me, I didn't know this, but he was a very popular Halloween costume. I think it's great that he came out and he was honest about what he's doing, because guess what? More people are probably doing benign things like that when they find out things like that, but they're probably not, for whatever reason, wanting everybody to know. But I loved it that he came out. I love his look. I love everything about him. I'm always a fan of someone's different, and he's different. He's a different human. He's a different NFL player. He never missed. Maybe I'm right. Someone will fact check me. But I don't think he ever missed a kick in college.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just talking about a super cool kid, I think. I bet people love, I hope he's a joy to be around within the locker room. In that interview, it just seemed like he was a very affable, lovable person, just almost like childlike. And I don't say that as an insult. I just mean like simple in a very nice way. Like that you could see yourself having a conversation with him and him not rubbing you the wrong way. He was just that kind of warm of a personality, in my opinion. You called me a fanboy when we left the radio too. I remember I was just like, I feel like you're going to tell me I'm a fanboy of Blankenship as well. For those of you who didn't hear, we did a radio segment this morning and we were talking about Jake Paul. And right as we cut out, and I couldn't defend myself, Jody threw a nice little jab in there and said that I was a Jake Paul fanboy. Good on you for doing that. It made me laugh. I was still laughing as I hung up.
It was a cheap shot. I took a cheap shot. You're right. You had no time to defend yourself. The conversation was over, and I was like, he's the anti-lawyer and Jake Paul fanboy, Byron Brown. And that was it. I love it. I'd rather be a Rodrigo Blankenship fanboy than Jake Paul. I think there's more honor in that, for sure.
I agree with it. I agree with it, my friend. Well, we appreciate you guys tuning in. Please subscribe. Find us on the YouTube, also on Instagram. You can click the link in the bio to subscribe. If you have any questions, please shoot them in either through direct message or our website. And as always, we appreciate the support. Thank you very much.